Have you ever tried sitting perfectly still in a quiet room, trying to do absolutely nothing? If you have, you've probably noticed your brain totally refuses to power down. Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We are taking a tour of the relentless, highly organized biological factory inside your head that literally never stops working, generating thoughts around the clock. To put this into perspective, think about this. We spend a massive portion of our lives, nearly 50% of our waking hours, in a state of spontaneous thought. Half of your day. That's half your day spent mind-wandering, daydreaming, and running an internal narration. It isn't just background noise either. It's a fundamental part of the human experience. And this actually perfectly illustrates what the pioneering philosopher William James realized way back in 1890. He coined the famous term stream of consciousness because he observed that our thoughts don't arrive in these disjointed, chopped-up fragments. Instead, they flow like a continuous river. What James didn't have the tools to see back then, modern cognitive neuroscience has totally revealed to us. This flowing river, it's driven by an incredibly intricate biological architecture. To map out this complex system, we've broken our factory tour into 6 quick sections: the always-on brain, the default mode network, fueling the mental engine, controlling thought traffic, reality checks and inner voices, and finally, why our minds wander. Section 1. The always-on brain. The metabolic cost of thinking. Now, here's a really cool thermodynamic trick your brain pulls off. While it consumes about 20% of your body's total energy, it is remarkably efficient. Engaging in complex external tasks requires high-frequency neuronal spikes, and those burn a ton of ATP, your cellular energy. But your spontaneous, wandering thoughts, they run on slower oscillations. They operate on a highly efficient, lower-energy thermodynamic level. So your brain can generate endless thoughts while keeping the metabolic costs incredibly low. It's an absolute masterclass in efficiency. Section 2. The default mode network. The engine of spontaneous thought. Let's meet your DMN factory workers, a collection of brain regions that reliably switch on the moment you rest. First, you've got the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC, acting as the central switchboard to integrate info. Then there's the medial prefrontal cortex, the emotional evaluator, that is constantly filtering thoughts by asking, hey, is this important to me? You also have the medial temporal lobe, which includes the hippocampus, acting as the memory gateway for mental time travel. And finally, the angular gyrus. That's your meaning maker, weaving semantic knowledge into a coherent internal story. Together, they literally construct your narrative self. Section 3. Fueling the mental engine. Neurochemistry. Okay, the brain structures provide the stage, but it's neurochemistry that actually keeps the assembly line moving. First up is glutamate. Think of this as the factory's gas pedal. It provides over 90% of the brain's excitatory signaling, allowing for rapid communication across neural circuits. This is what enables the lightning-fast formation of memories and concepts, like when a totally random memory just flashes into your head out of nowhere. Next, we have dopamine. Now, it's widely misunderstood as just a pleasure chemical, but it's actually the engine of salience and motivation. It drives wanting. Using a mechanism called reward prediction error, dopamine basically tags your internal thoughts with value. If a thought is useful, a dopamine surge stamps it with importance. And fascinatingly, a dopamine surge also inserts cognitive wedges into your flow of time, slicing an unbroken stream of thought into distinct, memorable episodes. But hey, any good factory needs a way to hit the brakes, and that brings us to GABA, which serves as the brain's essential inhibitory chemical. Without GABA working constantly to suppress irrelevant signals, our stream of consciousness would totally devolve into a chaotic cacophony of competing electrical impulses. You know, when you try to fall asleep but your brain just will not shut up? Yep, that's exactly what happens when the GABA brakes aren't being applied firmly enough. Section 4. Controlling thought traffic, semantic networks, and gates. So thoughts don't happen in isolation. They trigger spreading activation, bouncing from one associated concept to the next. To prevent a complete cognitive overload, your brain relies on the basal ganglia to act as the ultimate cognitive decider. Using a direct pathway fueled by dopamine, it gives a green go signal to let a specific thought into conscious awareness. Conversely, the indirect pathway acts as a no-go signal. It tightens the neurological leash to suppress and block unwanted thoughts. It is literally approving or denying your ideas in real time. And it doesn't stop there. The brain has other powerful gatekeepers. The thalamus acts like Grand Central Station. Using a layer of inhibitory neurons, it physically blocks out external noise and internal chatter through sensory gating.
Meanwhile, the nucleus accumbens operates like a biological AND gate, straight out of computer science. A neuron here might be primed by a memory from the hippocampus, but it will only fire if it also simultaneously receives a signal from the prefrontal cortex. It demands multi-verified signals to make sure only the absolute most relevant thoughts actually breach the threshold of your awareness.
Section 5. Reality checks and inner voices. Source monitoring. Because this biological factory is churning out relentless imagery, we have to constantly separate what is real from what is merely imagined. Like, when you think a word, why don't you hear it as a loud physical voice in the room? Well, to prevent us from hallucinating our own inner monologue, the brain uses a brilliant mechanism called corollary discharge. Step 1. The motor cortex sends a predictive signal. Step 2. The auditory cortex receives this warning and dampens its sensory response. And Step 3. The brain recognizes the thought as self-generated. In conditions like schizophrenia, this prediction mechanism breaks down, which is exactly why self-generated thoughts are misattributed as literal external auditory hallucinations. Now, what is truly mind-blowing about all this is that while the vast majority of us, around 90 to 95%, experience this stream of consciousness as a chatting inner voice, or endophagia, between 5 and 10% of the population completely lacks an internal monologue. For them, the mind is fundamentally silent. This condition is called an anendophagia. People with an anendophagia literally don't hear their thoughts. Instead, their nonstop mental stream consists of unsymbolized thinking. We're talking pure abstract concepts, visual imagery, and gut instincts. And just to be clear, this is an entirely healthy condition. While they might perform slightly differently on verbal working memory tasks because they lack that internal audio loop, their problem-solving and executive functions remain completely intact. It proves that thinking doesn't actually require words at all. Section 6. Why Our Minds Wander. Evolutionary Burden and Benefit. So, why does the brain spend all this time and energy wandering? Well, it gives us an incredible evolutionary edge through mental time travel. Our baseline state of mind wandering allows us to simulate the future, building behavioral scripts for situations we haven't even faced yet. It lets us reprocess the past so we learn from our mistakes, and unconstrained mind wandering fosters creative incubation, letting your brain make background connections for complex problem solving while you just go about your day. But this predictive machine is really fragile. When we suffer from sleep deprivation, the functional connectivity of the default mode network starts breaking down. This causes perceptual decoupling, where intrusive thoughts bleed into our waking tasks, which is what we all recognize as brain fog. And under chronic stress, the brain is flooded with cortisol. This actually physically thins the prefrontal cortex and rewires the brain stream away from creative future planning and straight into a state of intense hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats. This fragility is especially evident in psychiatric conditions like major depressive disorder, where the default mode network becomes dangerously hyperconnected. Imagine being trapped on a circular conveyor belt. The stream of consciousness gets caught in a vicious, unyielding loop of negative rumination and self-evaluation that the person simply cannot turn off. Fortunately, science is finding ways to help reset the factory. Promising clinical interventions like lens therapy or low-energy neurofeedback system deliver microelectromagnetic signals that disrupt these stuck neural loops. It effectively hits the biological reset button to free the mind from that relentless overthinking. So we've seen the factory workers, the chemical fuel, the biological gates, and the evolutionary purpose of this flowing river inside your head. Now, with your dopamine engines firing and your basal ganglia autonomously deciding exactly which thoughts get the green light, I have to leave you with one final provocative question. As your mind inevitably wanders off after this explainer, who is really controlling your thoughts?